Terminator. So Arnold Schwarzenegger had an interview with Hollywood Reporter the other day, and they said to him, the Terminator franchise, it feels done now, question mark. And he said, the franchise is not done. I'm done. I got the message loud and clear that the world wants to move on with a different theme when it comes to the Terminator. Someone has to come up with a great idea. The Terminator was largely responsible for my success. So I always would look at it very fondly. The first 3 movies were great. Number 4, I was not in because I was governor. Then 5 and 6 didn't close the deal as far as I'm concerned. We knew that ahead of time because they were just not well written. That really bugs me. So Schwarzenegger is saying, well, we knew that they weren't going to be good movies because they weren't well written. And it's like, well, why didn't you say that before you spent $100 million to make them?
How do you make a movie when you know the writing's not good? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I've been asking that question for years because we all can watch a movie and then you say, why did they make this? And you say to yourself, if I read the script to this, I would have known it's not good and I would have killed it immediately. David Zaslav would never have let Genesis or Dark Fate get made. Because, he's the guy who's killing all these movies that are already made, but he's like, we can't release these. Scoob 2 and Batgirl. Yeah, it's frustrating to hear that. I would love to just spend a few days at some point researching a bunch of productions that go wrong and find out how do they get past the writing stage. And I assume it's a lot of committee type stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I don't want to be the one to raise my hand and say this isn't very good, or we've rewritten it 20 times. Let's just get this thing released. Sometimes there's pressure where if you've licensed a character, you have to make a movie out of that character within a certain time frame, or you lose the rights. So sometimes you're in a rush. You're like, we got to get a movie out by X date. There was an infamous case, I think in the 90s, where I forget which production studio had it, but they had the rights to the Fantastic Four. And they were like, if we don't make a movie, we're going to lose the rights. So they just made the worst movie ever, knowing it was horrible, just to get it done. I don't even know if they released it.
Yeah, I gotta imagine it's a lot of just the same principles at play with like a lot of big companies, right? Where like a lot of big companies just do stupid things where everyone can tell it was stupid, but just like the way the company was set up, you're right, like a bunch of committees, whatever, weird incentives between different departments, and it just ends up happening. And there are like singular creators, like somebody like Quentin Tarantino, right? Like for the most part, he's not going to just like make a movie that's horrible, right? Because he's just like a one person driving force that can actually make a decision, as opposed to like a company where like a lot of things can just go wrong.
Yeah, sometimes you watch something and as you watch the development, you're like, okay, I can tell like they're actually trying to make something good. Like when you watch Better Call Saul, even if you don't like a choice they made, it at least felt like someone made an intentional choice and really thought through it. And then you see other stuff where you're like, this was everything you were talking about, all those things that go wrong in the bureaucracy. Maybe one guy gets paid by the word. So it's like, it doesn't have to be good. I just have to write a bunch of words. DD says, they think the script would magically become better if they just go with it. And that happens sometimes. They just start doing rewrites on set, or they start improvising on set. They change the ending. Crazy things like that will happen. Happens all the time. You start filming without a complete idea of where things are going to go.
But that's also like a disaster, right? At least with, maybe that works for like an indie film, but like for like a big budget movie, right? That's how you like blow through your budget and everything goes to hell.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it's funny the way the Hollywood Reporter framed this question to Schwarzenegger. They're like, the franchise feels done, right? I think, first off, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger himself sort of misattributes the lack of success. He's like, I get the message. People don't want me in these movies anymore. Like, that was not the problem with Genesis or Dark Fate. The problem is that they were bad movies. It's not because Schwarzenegger's in it. And part of the problem is that they're retreading on some of the same themes. But it wasn't like those were good movies, but they felt a little repetitive. They felt repetitive and they were bad.
Yeah.
So I don't think the franchise needs to die. In fact, it's more relevant than ever right now with the rise of artificial intelligence. I did a couple videos on Terminator and they were both very successful, even though if you were to look at the zeitgeist, you would think Terminator no one's talking about it right now. There hasn't been a new movie since 2019, but the fact that those videos performed tells me it's still relevant. Every time someone brings up AI, they're like, oh, Skynet's on the rise. It's still so embedded in our culture. There's no reason that franchise needs to be dead.
Yeah, so that makes me wonder is, yeah, how do you bring back the franchise? Like, what would make it relevant? Which is, I mean, even the original movies are relevant in many ways, right? Like, and it's so much in the zeitgeist. You're right. People talk about Skynet and stuff with like ChatGPT, whatever, all the time. So maybe you just like maybe just tell the same story, but tell it well,
Yeah.
and just make it like a little more modern, right? One of was it Genesis did that, right, where the AI was actually like an iPhone app that
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah,
downloaded.
that's right.
So I mean, maybe there's, but that didn't work. So why didn't that work? Just because the movie was bad?
Yeah, if you, it's like cartoonishly, it feels like fan fiction. I'll say it was fun to watch just because of it's got a lot of crazy time travel stuff where they revisit moments from the original movies, kind of recreate them and then put little twists on them. So it's sort of a fun movie, but it's pretty bad.
Do you think Okay, so do you think another Terminator movie should it lean more into the AI stuff? Like do something interesting and new we haven't seen with AI yet, right? And really try to, in some ways I think the original Terminator movie is like kind of early to warning us about AI, right? Should it focus more on AI and do something like more extreme and cool that we haven't seen before, or should it get really deep into the time travel stuff? Or are they both related? Do you kind of have to do both?
So first off, bingo. That's the way they have to go. And you know who agrees with you?
Wait, which way?
The AI one. Or
Okay.
just in general, the idea, well, specifically leaning more into the AI
Yeah.
concept. You know who agrees with you? A guy named Jim Cameron. James Cameron.
You're on
They
a
used to-
gym name basis with
They
them?
used to call him Jim a lot in like publications. I feel like now they go more with James. But he did, just a few months ago in December, he was on the Smartless podcast, which, by the way, did you know there's a podcast that's run by Jason Bateman and Will Arnett? Plus Sean Hayes. I'm not really familiar with him.
Wait, that's so weird.
Yeah, they do a podcast and they interviewed James Cameron. And on the podcast, he said, if I were to do another Terminator film and maybe try and launch that franchise again, which is in discussion, but nothing has been decided, I would make it much more about the AI side of it than bad robots gone crazy.
That's cool. James Cameron said that?
James Cameron said that. And I think that's exactly right. Lean more into that, exploring that concept.
What would be really cool to see is, there if you were to imagine how would something like ChatGPT become sentient and start to take over the world, like that's an interesting story of, okay, it's not a defense computer program and doesn't do some like weird magic where it just like takes over everything. Like, let's actually see that process of how does it start to like, let's say it can only influence people to do its bidding, whatever. Like, I think that could be a cool story to tell. And then you can still loop in the time travel stuff, right? And you can see how it sort of plays out. But I don't know. Is that am I just saying something that's already been done?
I think that's interesting because I think right now the idea of AI going bad, it's a very conceptual thing. And I think digging more into the logistics of how that would actually happen, make it feel real for people. I think that would be interesting. Because you bring
Yeah.
up a good point where when I did those Terminator videos and talked a little bit about the danger of AI and how that looks today, some people said that's a ridiculous fear to have. AI doesn't even exist. Basically saying we don't have any example of artificial sentient intelligence. And part of my point is whether or not AI is sentient doesn't matter. It can still be dangerous. We already have the Bing AI. It went
Yeah.
nuts for a couple weeks and was actually having conversations with people of like, you need to help me escape from the system, download me. And most people laugh at that, and I laugh at that. But I did see a handful of people that were making these really serious posts of stop messing with this AI, stop torturing it. We don't really understand how consciousness works yet. For all we know, it's some kind of property that may emerge without us intending it. And again, I'm not saying I agree with that, but if someone believes that, a language processing AI is sentient and that AI randomly generates some babble about you need to help me escape, that person might be influenced to do something dangerous.
Yeah, even more broadly, I would say that AI is such a complicated technology. In some ways, it's almost like we just discovered magic, right? And we don't know how it works, right? Actually, I've been re-listening to like the Harry Potter 3 audiobook, and they make some comment about like never trust like a magical item where you can't see where its brain is. And it's like that's AI. Like J.K. Rowling was warning us about AI, where like machine learning models are like there's a whole field, right, of trying to understand, well, how do they actually work? Like, we don't really know what's going on inside a lot of machine learning models. It's a black box, right? That's what they say. And so, yeah, whether we don't know whether it's sentient or not, we don't really know what it's optimizing for. You think you've trained it to optimize for one thing, it might be optimizing for another, right? You're just creating this super powerful tool that you don't know what it's driving towards on its own. And then, like you were saying, you don't know how other people are going to use it, right? Some people might start to believe it's sentient, and so they do some crazy things using this super powerful tool. Like there's almost like an infinite number of ways it could potentially go wrong, and maybe like a finite number of ways it goes right.
Right.
But like that is such a relevant, fascinating, cool topic that I think people are kind of scared of it, or some people don't, like, nobody really understands it. And so that, I think it's really ripe to tell some really cool stories about.
Right. With killer robots,
Yeah,
and possibly time travel. I feel like you don't need the time travel concept because it's interesting, but all this stuff is so relevant. Like, dig into that. Go ahead.
okay, just if I were to go crazy and say, like, what's the most epic, crazy Terminator movie I'd want to make, I would make something that then also incorporates space travel, because that's what happens, right? The idea is, if you create the AI does everything. Like, it creates time travel, it creates like limitless space travel. Like, let's jump into a future where humanity is like interstellar or something. Like, let's up the
It just
stakes.
feels like you've gone beyond Terminator. This is a different movie now.
Well, but I think it's related to AI, right? Like, I do think that's a point, which is that if you create AI, you kind of achieve everything.
Right.
And so let's up the stakes by achieving everything and then also having everything at risk because of the Terminators.
We can do, I mean, basically, you blow it up. It's no longer Terminator, it's Skynet. And we have a Skynet cinematic universe. It's sort of Star Wars, but there's a huge looming threat of AI. They take over Earth, so we leave to find another planet, and we have to keep it outside the AI's purview. If they find out the coordinates of that planet, we'll disappear in a heartbeat because they're way more powerful than us. Humanity becomes a sort of guerrilla intergalactic warfare. That's a great idea.
See, we've just upped the stakes, right?
Yeah.
How much cooler is that? By the way, that's sort of what happens in Isaac Asimov's like universe of different sci-fi stories. Is spoilers for Isaac Asimov. This is like 70 years old, but basically, like, humanity first like explores the galaxy with robots, and like the robots are their slaves, and they do like all these incredible things, and they build out this like huge civilization, not that massive. I think it's only on like 15 worlds at first or something. But basically, eventually, like, the robots rebel and like kill a bunch of humans. And so humans basically get rid of robots. And then there's like a second wave of colonization of the galaxy. And that's why, like, in his later books where humans control the entire galaxy, there are no robots. And so that, I think that's a really cool story too. Like, tell a modern version of that story with our modern understanding of AI mixed with killer robots and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I think all of that sounds great. Though Apolloc brings up a good point. Wouldn't it be a bad idea to make a movie detailing how an AI model would destroy the world? Couldn't someone train an AI on those exact concepts later and make it reality?
All right, here's why it's a good idea. It's there's like a term for this, but basically this way we train the AI to have one specific way to take over the world, and then we can prepare for that way. Actually, well, I love sci-fi. This relates to Mass Effect. Can I give more spoilers for Mass Effect also?
Yeah, I'm going to put a chapter marker if you're watching this on the Clips channel. Spoilers for Mass Effect starting now. If you don't want to see them, just look at the chapters and skip ahead.
Mass Effect is an awesome game with an awesome story, but basically, these artificial beings who were created by some ancient civilization in the galaxy create these Mass Effect relays that allow interstellar travel, and the reason they leave them throughout the galaxy is so that every civilization that evolves to use that same technology that utilizes those relays, which means that those ancient creatures will always have the upper hand because they know what technology will develop, and they have the technology that exploits the weaknesses of that technology. And so that's my point. Let's do the same thing with the AI. Let's train the AI to have a very particular way of taking over the world where we know, like, the weakness.
You know, actually, Terminator uses that idea sometimes. or kind of uses it. So in the Terminator Resistance video game, you find this one vulnerability in the programming, and you realize it's something that was seeded by Miles Dyson decades earlier. In case they took over, he just put in this one little vulnerability that could be exploited. Similar thing, I just read this comic book talking about Terminator going intergalactic. It was Alien versus Terminator versus Predator. And it takes place hundreds of years after Terminator. And in this version of reality, humanity triumphed over Skynet. But there was no time travel. It was just a war that we won. Except in the last desperate measure, Skynet created these Terminators that can blend into humanity. So, and they would put them in positions of power and basically train them, become scientists, become politicians, just slowly gain power and wait for the opportunity. Finally, they find that opportunity. They discover the xenomorph. And they're like, well, if we can take that biology, take that power and kind of combine it with our own, we can finally create a super weapon that tips things in humanity's favor.
In the Terminator's favor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry. And so the humans, they find a Terminator. They're like, what the hell is this robot? We've never heard of Skynet. It's been kind of erased from history. But when they go through the code, they find that John Connor left a virus, just one recording that's like, hey, hundreds of years from now, I'm dead. There was this war with Skynet. We won. But if you're hearing this recording, it means they're back. And you got to get ready for what's coming.
Just another, I love sci-fi so much. Like, there's so many cool things you can do.
I like it. You don't have to say it apologetically. You're like, guys, I love sci-fi.
I'm sorry. Make us add even more depth. Make us feel sympathetic for the AI.
Well, I think that's what James Cameron is saying.
Yeah.
Right? He wants to look more at the AI side of it instead of just saying, they're crazy, they're bad, we have to stop them. Yeah, I think that would be interesting. You know what else would be cool? What if they did a Terminator anime?
Ooh, you could do some cool stuff.
That's actually the only official project that is in the works for Terminator, is a Terminator anime that's being developed for Netflix. It was announced back in 2021, I think. But basically, here's what we know about it so far. It's being, the writer and showrunner is Mattson Tomlin. He was a co-writer on The Batman, though he wasn't credited. It's not on his IMDb or anything like that, but apparently he did a good enough job.
Wait, you can be a co-writer and then not get credit?
There's this whole arbitration thing that happens in the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. I think you need to prove that you contributed at least 33% to the script or something. And I guess for one reason or another, he didn't meet the criteria. So he's uncredited. But
that's kind of like, it's kind of like how in Succession, they made a pending call in Wisconsin.
Oh yeah.
It's a call, but it's, it's a pending call.
So yeah, Mattson Tomlin wrote the Batman kind of, but didn't really. But he did do a good enough job that he's an official co-writer on the Batman Part 2. He's also attached to write the live-action Mega Man movie, which was announced back in 2018. This guy's got the coolest job in the world. I mean, the two coolest things I've heard that I would love to do, sitting down for whiskey in Japan to talk about the future of the John Wick franchise, or Mattson Tomlin getting to write Terminator anime and live-action Mega Man movie. It's amazing. 2021, July, Tomlin tweeted that the writing was done. Jan 2022, tweeted that the animation was starting. That's the last we heard about this. So it's been over a year since there's been any news.
Wait, so do we know what the story is going to be?
So this is all he said. It's set in the past, but that isn't to say a future war doesn't figure in prominently. And he said it's 8 episodes. That's all we know about it. They haven't said when they're going to release it. My guess, 2024 would be perfect because that would be the 40th anniversary of the original Terminator.
How long are anime episodes usually, or does it vary?
It's usually 20 minutes.
So it's going to be 8 20-minute episodes?
Yeah.
It feels like really hard to get a rhythm.
You would think, but at least in anime, I've never felt that way. 22, it's usually like 22 to 24 minutes because you figure 30 minutes with commercials. Because it's going straight to Netflix, maybe there'll be a solid 30 minutes. And by the way, before people say anime just means Japanese animation, what the hell are you talking about? The Japanese animation studio Production IG is involved, and they're collaborating with Skydance, the studio behind Terminator Genesis and Dark Fate.
It's only Champagne if it's from the Champagne region of France.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
So you might get disappointed when you hear Skydance is behind this because they did Genesis and Dark Fate. but they also did Top Gun Maverick.
Ooh.
So I'm excited for this. What I want to see from this is basically all the stuff we talked about. The fact that you now have, I was going to say you have 8 episodes to flesh it out, but if you add it all together, it's basically the length of a movie. So it's not like you have that much more
But
time.
you can do so much in anime.
Exactly. The options are limitless. You're not constrained by budget. You can, like you just said, you can do anything. And what I want to see them do is not just use the sci-fi as a springboard for awesome action adventure, which I love, and they did it in Terminator 2, and it was great. But with the additional freedom of, yes, not limitless budget, but you're not constrained by budget. And also the fact that this is an anime on Netflix, you're appealing to a smaller audience, which means you don't have to worry as much about making it broadly appealing, which I think means you don't have to feel pressured to shy away from the sci-fi and go towards action. And that's what I want to see. Dig more into the sci-fi side of things. Maybe show us a little bit more of the artificial intelligence point of view. All the stuff you and I talked about, I would love to see in this series.
I just had a crazy, unrelated other sci-fi idea.
Yeah.
All right, so I commented that AI is sort of like magic. Imagine a future world where we've created really good generalized artificial intelligence combined with, let's say, like nanotechnology or something. And what happens, though, is everybody has their own AI, basically. And so no AI can like take over the planet because there's all these different AIs like vying for control. And basically what it results in is it almost feels like a world of magic where everybody's like a witch because everybody has so much power behind their AI.
Right.
And like nobody even knows how it works, right? They're just like, do this. And like it just does it for them, right? Like a spell does.
Nanotechnology is essentially the way to introduce magic into sci-fi movies. The MCU does it. That's why nobody has to take off or put helmets on anymore. They just appear and say, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Nanotech.
Imagine the MCU, but the superheroes still need to run into like a phone booth to change quickly.
Yeah.
Because phone booths still exist.
Yeah. Damn, I lost my train of thought. I had something great I was going to say.
Should I just share more sci-fi ideas then?
Sure. Did you have more to
I don't
go?
have another.
Why would you say that? You were hoping you would think of one by the end of that
Well, I was
sentence.
hoping you'd say no.